The most important thing is to remember that you should not stay on the floor. Touching over the floor, you should get to the first nearest wall. You still won't see anything, and if you try to open your eyes now, feeling shocked, you will suddenly experience a return to the physical body that has been lying in the bed all the time. Opening your eyes is impossible at this stage because you still do not have eyes, nor do you have a body of any kind or the ability to experience anything other than touching that is only real sense you have. Your being has not yet built the foundations of your new reality, and you will find yourself in very awkward terrain, too awake to get a perception of a dream, but still too dreamy to submit yourself to a field of the body lying a meter away from you. All you have to do is to touch and feel. Try a very simple experiment. Close your eyes now and get to your bathroom without opening your eyes, but groping for things. You would first come to a nearby wall, and then, feeling the surface of the wall with your palms all the time, you will move forward toward where your bathroom is, encountering switches and other things that are on the wall. But what is of precious importance is the continuity of feelings that your mind will receive through the palms of your hands. You will not get a picture of where you are going, but you will definitely know where you are and where you are going through tactile feelings brought to you by your fingers and palms. Now I want you to do the same, starting from an awkward position you have found yourself in, throwing yourself out of your physical body. Feel the floor until you reach the wall, and then, continuing with your palms all over the wall, stand up straight, never separating your hands from that wall. Even if you have to move to another wall, do it quickly and energetically. That feeling of the wall sliding under your palms is the only anchor that could save you in this storm of mental information and the desire of your mind to return to the body. In this segment of work, it is enough to stay in one place for even a few moments, and you will come back, completely clearly, being there in the waking world, in your bed, trapped in this reality. The return is inevitable, but we will continue to feel and touch further and further on from the body, groping the walls and sliding with your palms. Our only way is to move away from the body. That body keeps drawing us back with an exceptional kind of force like gravity, and all we need to do is move away from it by touching and sliding our palms over solid surfaces. That is the only and exclusive goal of this part of the work. We continue to grope further. Coming to the door of our apartment, we feel that surface which is considerably different from the wall. We feel a bit rougher nature of the woodwork. Then we come to the door knob, groping all the time, by no means lifting our hands up and ceasing to have contact with the surface we have been touching all the time with our palms. And most importantly, we must not stop moving under any circumstances. Our palms must not stay in the same place for more than a moment. It is necessary to say a little more about this strange place, which is gaining more in its reality as we keep moving further away from the body, and our mind gets filled up with information about that tangled path we have walked. Every inch we are more and more in an extraordinary realm, while being less and less in our bed. At some point, we will to be completely devoid of any sense of the physical body, groping against the walls of something we think is our room. We are really in a unique void, in the dark. Still, that void has such a living potential, as if we were in a white noise area between radio stations. We really know that there are radio programs and radio stations all around us, but miraculously we are in the area between now. All we perceive is the tuning sound and white noise. Also, the feeling we have about ourselves is something extremely fantastic. The difference between this consciousness and the one that is waiting for us in the bed is like between heavens and earth. Like the difference between this consciousness now, as you're reading these letters, and the consciousness after drinking a liter of wine. As much as you feel alone in that void, there will be life all around you, and you will have a very clear knowledge of it. However, something will be missing. It is as if a large part of you is left in that body that is left lying, together with all the burden and the bag of thoughts that your body carries around all the time. You will be free as never before, not on your own, but rather outside of your own, far away from yourself in that void, groping and walking through all that wonderful and living darkness. And in all that distancing from the bed where your sleeping body is, groping against the walls, you will be amazed when you touch a light switch that does not exist at all in your real room. But that switch will seem quite realistic, merely inviting you to stop there and study it well. Whatever you do, do not stop by any means. Grope further, go over it. Explore every new millimeter of the wall without stopping your exploration, divinely touching and sliding your palms over the new reality, always further. At one point, something wonderful will happen. A visual representation of the reality you have been touching all this time will begin to appear. Right then, the outlines appear, and then quite suddenly the whole room, or the hallway, or the lobby of the apartment where you are, suddenly a vision appears all around you. And you, completely taken aback by this marvelous moment in a completely new world, will have very little time to feel it. Make sure you feel the atmosphere of that world well, because you will return to your body very soon. Those are but moments, and your first projection outside your body will always end up very quickly, in your body. New fantastic experiences that are brought back upon your return are countless. You are so astonished and bewildered with what has happened to you. It is there exactly where our entire art will seem quite differently, precisely because it has really started working for the first time. It is very useful to make a palpable tactile path, a route that you will always follow. For example, the moment you find yourself on the floor, you feel the nearest wall. Then you slide your palms along it going toward the door. You come to the handle that you open. You go over the wall to the entrance hallway and come to the front door, then to the front door handle that you open and exit into the hallway of the building. With the same tactile action, without lifting your palms and fingers off the surface, you feel the handrail and go down the stairs to the exit of the building. This would be quite enough to follow until a vision emerge. The experience of returning to the body is always accompanied by a very special kind of tiredness, which is so characteristic of all lucid endeavors. It is a mixture of sweet intoxication, exhaustion, enthusiasm, euphoria, and electrical impulsiveness that is felt in every atom of your being. The whole next day will be spiced with these impressions. In fact, nothing will be the same after this, and your trajectory in our art will get a completely different vector now. Until now, every rocket fired from the ground inevitably fell down. But for the first time, now the projectile of your will has reached a sufficient speed to leave the shackles of the ground forever. From now on, your path will be paved with stars, and only the boundaries of your mind will determine the boundaries of the region in which you will reside. It is necessary to summarize all the steps briefly, as this skill easily turns into a set of completely random movements if we do not follow the instructions. First and foremost, it is necessary to acquire the habit of waking up without moving and opening our eyes. Once we have succeeded and find ourselves waking up motionless and with our lids closed, we wait a few seconds and carefully observe the feeling that our body gives us, which starts to change drastically after a few seconds. It is as if someone has covered us with a warm blanket, or as we feel that we are in a slightly different position than a moment ago. At that moment, we start with a phantasmagoric nodding of the head back and forth, imagining a miniature movement, almost as if we were performing it physically. That movement must be in thousands of millimeters, just enough to feel the movement of the head without even moving, as if the thought of moving leads to a sense of a movement. Right then, the body will fall into a particular state of trance, which can be accompanied by various sensory phenomena to which we should not pay any attention. All we need to do now is increase the amplitude of the swing, and in one moment that is entirely intuitively felt, we fly completely out of that amplitude, falling to the floor. As soon as we have fallen onto that floor, we should start groping with our palms across the floor, moving away from the body. We will be in the dark, but let our progress through that darkness not be disturbed at all. We get to the walls. We start touching the walls by going over things, pictures, light switches, furniture, always moving away from the body. At some point, the vision will start to intensify, and we will find ourselves in a three-dimensional environment. This is all you need to know for now. Now that we have set our clear beacons, let us get down to the details. The first thing we could come across is a specific change in consciousness that happens for the first few seconds after we wake up, remaining motionless. Those few seconds before we start moving our head lead to a huge change in consciousness, containing elements of an autoimmune reaction to this whole thing, and often these elements do not hesitate to do anything needed to bring us back into the body. In fact, the whole lucid experience is all that our being does not want. Not because it thinks it is bad, but because it is not familiar with it. As the fear of water, in the same way but immeasurably times stronger, there will be fear of a completely different world, a completely different reality, and completely different consciousness. For your being, for your mind, this experience will be completely similar to the experience of dying, to which we have no attitude because we absolutely do not know what it is. Our reactive mind has subordinated the whole dream and the mechanism of sleep to the benefit of our being, so now the consciousness in the dream is an intruder toward which it will have no mercy. The ways in which it will try to bring consciousness back under the auspice of the body are so cunning and varied that we could write a separate book on it, which will certainly have neither the time nor the place for here. However, the point is to know that every second of experience in a lucid dream is actually a struggle not to go back to the body, and our reactive mind will now turn you against itself with the same creativity with which it has been constructing our sweet dreams for years, setting traps and obstacles, after which you will look disappointedly at the blackness of the eyelids, instead at the diversity of the astral landscape. The second is undoubtedly the appearance of fear in the face of sleep paralysis. This is the first line of soldiers sent by our mind to distract us from all this before we even come out of the body. Always keep in mind that you are a stranger to that mind, as long as you think about the same mind. The moment you stop thinking about it, then your old mother is satisfied, always thinking of her child to be well fed and put to sleep. Nevertheless, what the mind wants is for you to be within its reach ultimately. Not so that it can control you, but for it to be able to take care of you, look after you. always having you just for itself. The neophyte must understand this mechanism because the difference in perception determines the ability to dive into sleep. The depth of sleep is not achieved by a ritual or technique, but exclusively by understanding the mechanism of the mind by which it is constructed on a wholly archetypal and primordial plane. Fear is the first and strongest whip of a great mother to make her child stay in the room and finally fall asleep. This fear, which occurs almost automatically when we enter a state of sleep paralysis, already after the first few seconds of immobility after waking up, is the most terrifying and creepy thing an aspirant can feel on his skin, especially when this phenomenon is accompanied by the nature of the void in which we shall soon find ourselves. They act with equal force on the aspirant's mind, like the most terrible nightmare. But such fear is always and exclusively possible when we have stagnation in projection, that is, when we do not have a clear plan and intention to move away from the body. And the closer we are to the body, the greater and more paralyzing the fear will be. As we keep going away from the body by groping, so the fear will disappear the way the effect of gravity weakens once a rocket has been launched. At the same time, one of the characteristics of a lucid dream is that the moment a vision and a dream scenario appears, the fear disappears the same moment as if wiped off. In fact, fear almost always occurs during sleep paralysis, when we are still in the body, never during a full astral experience. When it appears, it is only an indication that we are on the right path and that we now need to get out of that middle state with intensive action in which we are neither awake nor asleep. And the way out is with a phantom movement, little by little, as if we want to get out of the quicksand and break away from the sticky slime that keeps us chained to a sleeping body in the bed. Get out of the bed, get away from your body. Little by little, keep on going away. The act of moving your head is the only thing you need and which you need to dedicate yourself to completely. This is a very simple instruction, but crucial to success. Your subconscious does not want enlightenment. It does not want the light of knowledge. It just wants you to feel safe in the dream that it has constructed just for you so devotedly. It wants you only for itself. It does not want change. It does not want the truth. It does not want anything but you. Your bed is a mental projection of security, and it is nothing but a shadow that fights frantically for every second of your unconsciousness and your dormant nature. As much as a dream is a mold for the will, so it is darkness and paralysis of sleep, the plasticine that our shadow plays with, always making what we are afraid of, sculpting that form of horror and terror in a unique way, just because we deviated from the path. And instead of moving away from the body with a tactile imagination of touching, we are now standing still, letting fear touch us, sting and frightening us in a way only our mind is aware of, knowing every nightmare dreamt and of every phobia of ours, because in the end, our mind is what has constructed them. Also, it is very important not to try for 2 days in a row. This is one of the biggest causes of failure, especially when the first couple of successful lucid dreams happen. Then a dry period follows very quickly when we are really unable to accomplish anything. This is partly because the mechanism of dreaming has been disrupted, and we have violently penetrated parts of sleep by declaring war on our reactive mind, which now tries to think of the ways to take us back from the mad and adolescent tendency to separate from the only true parent, our mind. If we try day after day, the dream cycle will shift, and we will enter a period when it is impossible to reach the same circumstances and conditions that are responsible for the REM phase. A similar thing happens if we go to bed late for 2 days in a row. There is a well-known problem of replacing day for night, when we are rested during the day, but as we do not have an opportunity to get any sleep in the evening. Nights with insomnia will follow, which is further intensified by our neurosis and thoughts after going to bed already calling for insomnia. Therefore, the very important thing is to allow 1 day of natural awakening and natural sleep after each attempt at lucidity, letting our mind seemingly take the lead in this match. It is a tactical retreat, a deliberate slow down to make the opponent think it is closer to us and speed up the pace to catch up, increasing our adversary's chances of making a crucial mistake. Late meals and consuming water before bed can be a major cause of poor sleep, leading to a discordant proportion of non-REM and REM phases. In fact, any significant awakening between REM phases affects the duration and quality of the REM phases negatively, and the awakening part of our lives as well, turning it into a vicious circle. There is one very simple solution that requires refraining from eating or drinking water 2 hours before going to bed. It is a very bad habit to drink water just before bedtime, partly because the water will soon cause a tendency to urinate, which either weakens the sleep or leads to waking up too often. Preventing food and drink intake 2 hours before bedtime in lucid work sometimes make the difference between complete success and the worst and ultimate failure. Cases of people where this change only greatly facilitates lucid consciousness already on the first attempt are numerous. It should be emphasized that this thing significantly increases the chance of achieving a lucid dream, but it is by no means a condition for success. Only when all the mechanisms have been launched, including the diet and hydration regime, which are certainly very important, the projection is ensured and guaranteed. What we should be worried about is that slippery ground onto which our neuroses push us. Simply, it is so easy to omit and overlook all these points for completely mundane reasons, and even though we are sure that we have constructed everything well, it can always happen that we have overlooked or missed just one or more points, sometimes wholly forgetting that we have to do anyway. During the first couple of successful motionless awakenings without opening our eyes, the level of euphoria will often completely prevent going back to sleep. Even if the mechanism of phantom head movement has been done for a whole minute or two, absolutely nothing will happen. We are simply so excited that mental euphoria has had the same effect on the mind as to any physical movement or eyelid opening. In other words, it has awakened us and brought us back to the beta phase of brain activity. There is such a perfect and simple aid here, which can actually be applied whenever we awake with movement or even remain motionless, but with a great deal of mental activity and euphoria. This is the identical action we described in the chapter on scrying. Slight, almost imperceptible squeezing of the eyeballs, imagining looking back toward the center of the skull, produce a special feeling of drowsiness. Something like mental yawning, which has a remarkable effect on our mind when performed in the period after waking up, and in just a few seconds bring us back into a state of extreme drowsiness. Such an act should never last more than a few seconds. Even a second more, and we can completely fall into the oblivion of sleep. This is a kind of a seesaw that multiplies our chances of success, of the subsequent phantom movement when mastered well. Personally, I always take this step no matter how close to success I am. This eye movement, and more precisely, that mental attitude, is crucial in obtaining visions, which, when carried out by the aspirant, can bring a crystal clear image even during the fully awake state, in just a few seconds. Another particularly good way to speed up the mechanism of sleep paralysis is to simply pretend we are sleeping in the first few seconds after waking up and stay still, deceiving our own mind. Imagine that falling down, falling through the floor, into the dark bottom of dormant reality, welcoming you so warmly. Pretend that this is precisely what is happening. Imagine for a moment that feeling of warmth, of the unconscious luring you down, deeper and deeper, below you, sinking toward that warm and pleasant depth. After a few seconds of doing this, we can start the phantom movement of our head. The need for visualization is an old, good foe of everything we want to achieve here. No visualization or construction of mental images is necessary. On the contrary, they significantly reduce our chance to succeed. All that is needed is primarily tactile, not visual imagination. What we need is to imagine and feel the movement, so you shall not imagine a single image until the very lucid dream. Vision will come by itself, the moment you bring your mind into a state in which it will naturally talk to you in images. However, until you have left your body, visualization is entirely redundant. The whole concept of Western ceremonial magic is rather based on this ability, which really has no standpoint in the technique of lucid dreaming. It can be said that the endless queues of practitioners waiting in line for an astral projection are so long because the whole mechanism has been established upon utterly wrong assumptions and strategies. In fact, all rituals have a completely different effect once they have been performed in a dream, when their effect gets boosted and energized to the extreme. Whenever practitioners cite Liber O as a method of rising on the planes, it simply cannot help but evoke sadness and compassion in me for all those people who keep endlessly trying something that absolutely should not be done from the physical plane. Nor does such performance bring anything but an exercise in basic visualization, and really nothing more than that. If this instruction from Liber O is applied from this plane, it looks like a fairy tale, like a journey of imagination, and really has nothing to do with discovering higher and deeper spheres that are so concrete and tangible. But if the aspirant embraces this instruction in a lucid dream precisely, once he has already reached it, then this is the most sublime instructions possible. There is nothing more penetrating for human consciousness than the desire to go up in a dream, and it will certainly be one of the experiences that the aspirant has remembered for the rest of his life. Indeed, if the rising on the plane, as stated as in Liber O, is the ride from a lucid dream or from certain places in the dream which will be discussed later, then the whole exercise radiates billions of suns brighter. There is one completely incomprehensible obstacle that happens with all practitioners, and that is the tendency to shorten the performance of a phantom movement by a whole minute, or to do something else, or simply give up going back to sleep. Shortening the performance of this movement is certainly one of the key factors that prevents us from penetrating a conscious dream. Right next to it, there is a difficulty in recognizing that we are in sleep paralysis. Unfortunately, this knowledge is often obtained once we have given up and come back to wakefulness, which will be too late. Simply, we will really begin to face all the circumstances that accompany sleep paralysis, from sound hallucinations, dogs barking, or someone ringing our doorbell, for example. Still, we will react to these hallucinations completely without realizing that we are in another reality, and instead of starting detaching ourselves from our body with a rocking motion and finally slipping off the bed, we will misdirect ourselves on these sound illusions, reacting to them in a physical way, that is, by movement. As we have said earlier, we will hear the doorbell ring, and we will stand up to check who came to visit us as a response to that stimulus, stunned to realize that we have fallen under the influence of our reactive mind and done the last thing we have to do. We have made a physical movement and break Ariadne's thread that lead us to the depths of a dream. One very important point of this presentation is sleep interruption, which is an aid that creates an ideal sweet spot for entering the lucid dream. It is like a scouting team in a war, which is to prepare the whole strategy, able to win the whole war with a single piece of information. Suppose we pay attention to the sleep diagram once again. In that case, we will notice that REM phase is the longest before awakening. It lasts approximately 5 to 6 hours after going to bed, or to be more precise, after falling asleep. We should definitely add another 15 minutes to that time, as long it takes to start the process of falling asleep. Our brain has a phenomenal mechanism that continues the sleep phase at the spot where we have left off, even after we wake up. That is to say, once we wake up during the REM phase and after we went back to bed again, we will enter the same REM phase without losing 90 minutes of non-REM, nothingness in which there is no oniric activity at all. Also, the process of falling asleep is much faster, so once we have gone back to bed after waking up and going to the toilet, we will easily fall asleep again and enter directly into the dream phase. It is even possible to continue the dream from where we interrupted, like after a pause while watching a movie. This beautiful mechanism exerts such violent pressure toward our goal. All it takes is to set the alarm to go off 5 or 6 hours after we went to bed. Sometimes it should be shorter, sometimes longer, but this time window should be our approximate target. With more experience, we will define our ideal personal moment much more precisely to be able to apply this as successful as possible. After an alarm clock wakes us up after 5 or 6 hours of sleep, a very important instruction is to follow. We have to get out of bed and stay out of it for about 15 minutes to half an hour. We can go to the toilet, turn on the computer and check emails. We are free to go out of the terrace and breathe fresh air, but whatever we do it out of bed. That intention to get out of the area that has been so vilely constraining us in the most perfidious state of prison has a pervasive effect on success in lucid dreaming. After about 15 minutes, we will go back to bed and repeat the affirmation that we will wake up without moving and opening our eyes. This time, its path to our unconsciousness mind is much shorter and easier to accomplish, freed by a frigid non-REM phase that so vilely erases all our intentions and desires and brings a dream that suits our reactive mind. We should not exaggerate this. We need not to making an affirmation for more than 5 minutes. We then have to fall asleep. The next awakening should be natural, and we will notice how much more frequent and successful awakening without moving is if we take this break. It is a quantitative gain. In terms of quality, getting into sleep paralysis and rolling out of bed with an imaginary movement is incomparably more successful than when the affirmation is made just before bedtime. It is a very good idea to drink a glass of water after the first awakening with an alarm, so that the discomfort in the bladder creates a shallow sleep, which is so suitable for entering a lucid dream. With this method, the second awakening, which is always without an alarm, will be permeated by a particular dose of drowsiness and a special kind of faintness, as if our brain was swimming in the fluid of sleep and we can barely keep our attention. You will almost feel pressure in the head and have headaches from so much drowsiness. This is exactly what we need. This swimming of the mind in a pond of unconsciousness nature, sculpturing a dream and creating an ideal polygon for lucid dreaming. There is only one danger that happens to beginners too often. It is insomnia. which can occur after we get up for the first time with an alarm, and once we went back to sleep. After making an affirmation that we will wake up without moving and opening our eyes, it is quite possible that we will not be able to fall asleep again, no matter how hard we try. Even more, we will be awake like never before. Our unconscious nature finds a way to hinder us on our inner journey once and again, just as it did create fear in sleep paralysis, and instead of covering us with drowsiness and unwillingness to do anything consciously or have the strength for such endeavors, it now set us an opposite trap, partly because of the euphoria and anticipation of a lucid dream. Now our alertness rises to such a level that we are so awake with no chance of falling asleep. What is extremely important if we find ourselves in this kind of insomnia is to lie consciously without a single move of the body at any cost. We will notice that our own body dares and ridiculous, making every inch of us itch to the point that staying in one position is completely impossible. But we have to persevere in this and passively wait for the body to fall asleep. This insomnia will be dominant in more introverted people during the first few attempts. Still, like any other artificial creation of our unconsciousness mind, it will subside with time and patience, the only weapons to which the reactive mind has no counterparts. Also, a slight squeeze of the eyeballs and a subtle shift of gaze upward, looking toward the scalp, toward the center of the skull, does wonders and puts many people to sleep in just a few seconds. So this technique can ideally be applied in this place too. In any case, by no means should you try for 2 days in a row, especially if you are attempting the method of interrupting the sleep after 5 to 6 hours. If you choose this method, which multiplies the chances of success, you should not try more than 3 nights per week. It is best not to set predetermined days for attempts at lucid dreaming, for every routine leads to the involvement of the reactive mind and the creation of immunity and a strategy by which it will act against us. Let your attempts be spontaneous and free from any pre-arranged schedule. A framed procedure will be much needed to preserve in the technique of moving the head and in those small steps after we have left the body. This is where we need to stick to military discipline, and we will witness that in those moments as our minds will sway like a leaf in a chaotic storm of unconsciousness. Indeed, the specific type of insomnia that accompanies practitioners in lucid attempts can be a major obstacle, affecting the entire following day and contributing to the aspirant spinning in circles of nonsense without really doing anything. Insomnia that accompanies an attempt of lucid dreaming, especially when we use the method of interrupted sleep after 5 to 6 hours with an alarm, disrupts the sleep and dreaming cycle altogether, and thus the possibility of even accidental success in attaining of lucid dreaming. But there is one utterly simple trick that insomnia is powerless against and can be used against insomnia regardless of our lucid dreaming attempts. All it takes is to try not to sleep on purpose. Make an effort and pretend you don't want to sleep at all, confronting your sleep openly and staying awake on purpose. Imagine that you will get in trouble if you fall asleep. Try to want to stay awake on purpose. Very quickly you will feel the mechanism of sleep and mind wandering that will soon navigate our being into regions of sleep. There is another extremely useful form of movement that separates consciousness from the region of the body in the period where we will fall into sleep paralysis, after waking up still and remaining in that stillness for a few seconds. It is the imagining of falling backward motion, like a somersault backward, where this movement must not be visual performance, but exclusively and only in a tactile sense. That backward movement of the head must be aggressive and full of impulse. We must do our best to keep turning backward, and that such a motion lasts at least 1 minute, no less. As with the phantom movement of the head, We must not let go or give up this movement just because it seems to us that nothing special is happening in the first minute. Separation can happen at any time, even when we are fully convinced that there will be no lucidity at all. And just when we are ready to give up everything, we suddenly obtain a strange feeling that our body is bending, or that we are in an utterly undefined position, or we hear the barking of dogs outside, or buzzing noise in the ears. In this case, the method by which we get completely out of the body is to simply roll to the side. That movement is a winning combination every time we find ourselves in sleep paralysis. The result will always be to find ourselves on the floor outside the bed, after which we start to touch the floor and walls and repeat the procedure that has already been clearly described. It is not uncommon for us to be uncertain whether we are in the void or reality at all. We could find ourselves in doubt as to whether we are dreaming or not, even later when the lucid experience becomes more authentic. Fortunately, there is one straightforward method that can show us what the realm we are in is. In fact, it can be said that as soon as we have doubts, it is quite likely that we are inside a dream. Whenever we need to check if we are asleep, we should simply close our nostrils with the fingers of one hand and breathe through our nose. If we are sleeping, we will always be able to breathe, even though we have disabled our breathing with our fingers. The reactive mind cannot project and deprive the essential functions of life, of which it is a part. Therefore, regardless of its hidden intention, it always prioritizes processes that are as old as it is. Breathing is precisely the mechanism of the same tributary nature as the reactive mind, which both flow into the great ocean of our unconsciousness, which is the source of all these primordial mechanisms.